Hello folks, and welcome back to the channel. This is part 2 of the Regional Rail Departure Board series that we have been working on, and thank you so much for all the nice comments that have been made on the YouTube channel. You put yourself out there. I've only been doing this a couple months, and you're not sure what's going to happen, particularly with the internet world, but everybody has been so kind, so supportive, so thank you for that. So let's go ahead and dive back in. So when we left off last time, we had this, we had our block set up, and we had the HTTP call. We sugared that down into a useful array or list of train objects that we created, and we had this on the screen. We could hit it with a debug breakpoint, which was kind of satisfying, but it sure would be nice to see something on our screen. So that's what we're gonna work on today. We're gonna start to take this no application and make it look a little bit more like this with the data that we have gotten from the API point from the regional rail system onto our screen. And so let's go ahead and get rid of that debug point if you put it in there and you haven't gotten it out already. Slide that over a little bit. And I want to grab, hit play there. I'm going to grab a couple of packages right before we start. I know at least one of these will work without a restart, and the other we will find out here together live on this channel. So we want to grab Google Fonts. So I'm at pub.dev, go into the installing tab, and that will give me the latest version, which I can copy and paste into my pubspec.yaml. This is an outstanding package. They announced this at Flutter Interact last month, and it used to be you had to go to Google Fonts page, download the files, and import them into your assets folder, and then do a little work here to bring them in. And now you can just reference them, which is great because I find that I pick out a font on Google Fonts and then I get it into my app and find out I don't like it after all and have to go back. So it's good for kind of flipping through the different options. In addition to Google Fonts, we want to be able to convert our date object from the train into a time on the screen. And for that, I like to use a package called date format. And it's this one here. There's a couple different options for formatting date. The international one is pretty popular, but I like this one. It gets a good score on the system, actually better than Google Fonts, go figure. So it seems to be pretty stable, and I find it a little easier to use. So I'll stick that there. And save that, and that should give us all the packages that we need for today's work. And so I'd like to go and actually start to build this departure page. So we added the departure file to our screens folder here. So let's go into that. And we have text station at the top. That's okay for now. But beyond the text, let's also put some actions here. I'm going to code format that. So we've got our text widget, which is our title, and now we're going to have an actions array. And inside of there, we want to put the ability to go to the settings page and change the station and the number of trains that you can see, the direction, etc. So inside there, we'll put a flat button. And that will have a child, and that child will be a text, which will say change. And we'll give that a style. And I'm going to give it the orange accent, so it's going to look like this here. So we'll have a style, which will be a text style widget. Everything's a widget. I have a color, and the color I'm going to use is colors.deep orange accent. And you know, on second thought, I'm actually going to flip back to main rather than hard code the accent color here. It's a better practice to go to main.dart and put it in my material theme data. So inside the theme data, let's put an accent color, and then let's make that colors.deep orange accent. Save that. We can come back to departures, and instead of the text style widget, we can do theme.of.context.accent color. Oh dear. Nope. Sorry. We still need the text style. And so then we want, there we go. Sorry about that. So we want the text style, we want a color property, and then we can apply that theme.accent of color. And we still need, on a flat button, we need an onPressed method. I can find where I am. Here's text style. Child text ends there. OnPress. There we go. Whew. And I don't think we've closed the flat button yet. No, we have not. All right. Why don't I format that and you can look at it there. That got a little messy. So for the onPress, this is going to go to the settings page eventually. So I'm just going to put a placeholder to do. To settings. We will circle back to that. So there's our change button. Doesn't do a darn thing yet. We'll get rid of the center. That was just a placeholder for us. And instead of a center, we want a list view. And we want a builder. And we're going to want an item builder and item count. But before we do that, let's go ahead and actually bring in our train so we can build with it. So get to that list view. We will wrap with a stream builder. And we can bring in a stream builder, which is a list of our train objects, which we will need to import. And we'll need 2 brackets there. Our stream will be our BLoC, which we have already brought in up here. So we will be BLoC.trains. Anytime we have something like this, a stream, we need to provide something if the stream is not yet loaded, which will be the case here because we're going to be reaching out to an API and there'll be a slight delay. So a really nice thing to look at here, if we don't have what we're looking for, would be a circular progress indicator. And they always look better if they're centered on the screen. So let's do a center widget, a child, and a circular progress indicator. All right. And we want to return that if not snapshot.hasData. So if there is no data, let's give a return progress indicator centered on the screen. Otherwise, we're going to display our list view. And so our item count is going to be snapshot.data.length. And our item builder is going to be context index, and then we need curly braces. It's a function. And here is where we would build our departures. And so rather than clutter this part up, I'm going to come down here, still inside the class, but I'm going to build myself a couple of helper functions. So I want, every time we have a result, I want this departure here. And then I also want this header up at the top at the very beginning. So I have a header and then I have really a departure row. So I'm going to have two helper functions. I'm going to have one that says build header. And I'm going to need the context. So I'm going to make that a pass-in parameter. And what I want to do with the header is I want to return a column. That's obviously going to have some children. And so I want a size box to space this a little bit. So what I want is a little space here on the left so it's not sitting right there. And then I want to kind of space these out proportionally based on the space that I have left after I've added that little spacer here to the left. So follow along with me here for a minute. I want a size box, and then I'll explain. I want a height of 15. And actually, back up a little bit. So we're building this header not only includes this orange, it also includes the departure. So when we build a header, we're building these two together. So the first one, first column here, I'm building the departure. So we've got a size box, and that is adding a little bit of space between the top here. All right, and then I want a row. And I want the main axis alignment to be main axis alignment start. And I'm going to put the colon there. I'm going to let the format do its thing. All right, so we got main axis alignment start. And then that row is going to have children. And those children are going to be a sized box with a width of 25 pixels. So that is going to push this departure text over here to the right a little bit. And then we'll have our departures. So we can say text widget departures. And we're going to have some styles here, and I'm going to give this one a style theme.ofContext text theme title. Now we haven't assigned anything yet there, but I'm going to go ahead and give it that, and then that'll give us something to latch onto when we go ahead and actually do the styling in our material app theming. All right, save that. We don't see anything on the screen yet because we haven't built the header. That's okay. And then after that, in fact, let's go ahead and put it on the screen just to make it easier on ourselves. I'm going to come back up here, and inside our item builder, let's actually build the head so we can see what's happening as we build this. Even though it's not styled yet, we'll be able to see the elements as they're laid down. So I'm actually going to add +1 here. And the reason I'm going to do that is if there are, so let's say there are 2 items. We have 2 results in our train array, or list of trains. We got 2 back. The first time it iterates, it's going to have an index of 0. That's when I want to see the header. And then when it's 1, then I want to see the first record, and it's 2, I want to see the second record. So for that to happen, our length is only 2 if we have 2 items, and you're only going to get 0 and 1. And so if you don't add 1, it doesn't give you something to get the header for. Also, if there's no results, I still want the header. I just don't want the results below it. So if we add 1, and in here we say if index equals 0, then we're going to return build header. And we need to pass that a context. Else, we're going to return let's just leave it as a container right now, but this is where we want to put our actual results. All right, now I got to whack with something here. Let's see if I take this out. That needs a bracket here. It's probably my least favorite part of Flutter is when you get these stupid things. Expected to find that. There we go. I better format that before I totally confuse myself. So there we go. We get the departures on the screen there. Hope you followed my correction, or didn't follow when I went off track in the first place. So that's our build header, or at least we're getting part of our build header there. So we've got down here, we've got our row, and down below the row, so back up here in the column object, we want a size box to give us a little bit of a spacer between the departure word and then the orange row, which is like here. So we want a little space in between here. So we'll do another row here, which will give us our row for these time, destination, track status, etc. That will have a children item. And for our children, so first of all, I do want to push this off the edge a little bit, so I'm going to start with a sized box. And that's a height of, sorry, width of 15. Because I'm going to push it off the left side. And so for the remaining, I want to basically space these evenly, but I want destination to have more space than the others. So we want to take up all the space. So this is a good candidate for an expanded widget. And so the first one will have a child, and that child will be a text of time. And we're going to give it a style, and I'm going to give it one of these material. So I'm going to go theme of context dot text theme body to. So this is another style that we have yet to define, but when we do, it will change all the ones that we've defined with body to. So I'm going to copy this 3 more times. One of these days I have to memorize the shortcut for doing that. Or write it down right in front of me. Track. Status. You can get away with being lazy and not doing shortcuts when you're doing this stuff until you put it on video and everybody notices, hey, you could just do Alt-Control down for that. All right, so we got time, destination, track, status, and golly, before I did that, I should have put the flex factor in there, but flex factor is what's going to determine how much room it takes. So it's kind of an arbitrary figure. It's more about relationships to each other. So this one I want to have a flex value of 1, and then the destination, which obviously needs more space on the screen, that's I'm going to give a flex value of 3. So it's going to take up 3 times as much space as time, and everything else I want to leave as a 1. So this row will take its 15.0, I should put 15.0 pixels here. It'll figure out what's left, which is the point of the expanded, and it's going to divide it up in 6 parts, and destination is going to get half of it because it's got a flex value of 3, and these basically add up to 3, so they get the other half of what is left. So if we were to flip this to landscape mode, you would they would all expand out. They'd just widen with the screen. All right, that should give us our header. Let me save that. And I think these are white on white. Nope, there they are. Okay, time destination track status seems about right when we look at the spacing, and we can mess with that later when we start to get the actual results in here. So that's our header, and that comes so when we get our very first result. And so when we get anything else, we don't want to build a header, we want to build a departure item. So down here below all of that, let's do an underscore build departure. And we are going to pass that a train item. All right, and that is going to return a column with children. I'm going to put my semicolon so I can format that. All right. And for our children, they need to look an awful lot like the above. So I'm going to take this row here, right here, and I'm going to copy it down, put it there, because we want the same ratio for all of these. We do want a space of 15 here. We do not want time. We instead want, so this is where I'm going to use the format date plugin. So let's use format date. That will import it up here. And it takes in the date as the first parameter. And so that's going to be train.depart time. So that's the time, a date time object from our train. And the formats, the plugin has some help here in the README. The downside of this plugin is that the documentation is not super great as far as all the different options, but they are there, and you can kind of feel your way around them, like HH. They give you some examples, and there's just enough there to kind of piece it all together. It's nice when they have like a big long series of all the different formats that you could use. But the format that we're going to use is going to be, so we do a bracket. So you can do HH, you do a comma as a separator, so it's going to push all these together. And N is your minutes. Now that's going to give you, let me come back up here. So let's start to paint this on the screen. So where we put our to do up here, we're returning the empty container. Let's start to return build departure, and let's pass it our snapshot.data with an index of index -1 and y index -1 because we're incrementing past here. So when we go to the 0, we're actually going to want, when we want the index of 0 from the train, it's going to get, the first index is going to come through and get snatched by the header. So when 1 comes through, that's our opportunity to grab the 0 from the index of our list. And so we got a 1 here, we subtract 1, and it works fine. So I'll save that. So there we go. Our time is starting to be filled in. You can do HH is going to give you, and it's not obvious now because we're in the double-digit time frame, but if this was like 9 o'clock, it would show 09 and 08 if it was 8 o'clock. And I actually prefer it in just the single. I want to just get an 8:55. I don't want 08:55. So I changed it to that, but whatever you prefer. Also, this, so that would be a 12-hour with both, so you'd get 08 for 8 o'clock. The capital H's is a 24 hours, so if you're in Europe or Canada and you want that 24-hour time, you should use that HH. And if you just want 24-hour time and a single character, if there is only one, so if it's 8 o'clock in the morning, you just get an 8, you can do that. So you can mess with that until your heart is content. I'm going to change this to body 1. So in my app here, you can see This is going to be the body 2 style. That's orange and small. And then the body 1 is going to be like the title, but a little bit smaller. So we'll get to that later. So for our destination, we're going to replace that with snapshot. Or sorry, we're inside here. Train.destination. Gets really easy in here if you pick the right drop down. There we go. Change our theme to body 1. And down on track, we'll do train.track. Change our theme to body 1. And status is, of course, going to be train.status. There we go. So there's our time, destination, track, status. Doesn't look like this yet, so I think we're ready to take care of that. We've got all the information on the screen that we need, and so now we can start to style it. So let's skip over to the main.dart. Hope that made sense. I feel a little scattered today, so hopefully that's not coming through in this video. But I'm going to take out the primary swatch. I'm not interested in that because I'm going to use dark mode. So brightness is going to be brightness.dark. I think that gives it more of a arrival board type flavor. It just seems to be the standard at airports and trains, is that they're kind of darkish looking. And we need a font that is more electronic type, more of a digital board type font. So when we define our text themes, let's do that now. I'm going to change this. Well, we got the Flutter demo. Let's just change this to train departures. All right, so let's give a text theme to our material app. And so that'll be a text theme widget. Everything's a widget. And so body 1 is what we gave to these, the destinations right here. And so for that, I'm going to use Google Fonts. And I did have to import it, so I had to hit enter at the end of Google Fonts. Here's every font that Google has. It's amazing. You can get this, just that one import, and you can do whatever you want. But I liked Orbitron for this. And so inside there, you can do a text style property, and then you can do a text style widget, which allows you to specify some of the things that don't come along with the font, like color. So we'll do color. I'm going to do cyan, and I'm going to do a font size of 18.0. Do body 2, we'll do Google Fonts dot Open Sans is what I'm going to use here. So this is what we assign to this here. So I want this to look slightly different. So we'll do Open Sans here. And we'll give that a text style as well. So we'll have a color, and for that, we're going to do deep orange accent. And the font size is going to be 12. So it's going to be fairly small. Okay. Can save that. And then we can do title. Let's do the title, because we did assign that in a couple of spots. Google Fonts. And we'll do Orbitron there too. So we want to give it the same look as down here. Just a little bit bigger is really what we're looking for here. So we'll do the text style. which will be a text style widget. The color will also be colors.cyan. So we want the same color. The only thing we're changing here is font size, which we will make bigger. And it looks like I wiped out the closing parenthesis for my material app there. So we'll let auto format get that nicely in a line. All right. So there we go. Starting to look a little better. So there is our answer to the whether you can load Google Fonts while it's still running. You can't. So I'm going to stop the emulator and restart it. All right, there we go. Emulator restarted. All issues are gone, and we have answered the age-old question: can you add Google Fonts package on the fly? And the answer is obviously no. So the only thing I see here is that we don't really have a whole lot of space between. These things are kind of running into each other. And so let's go back to our departures. And in our build departure method here, we have a column, and we've only added just the row. At the end of the row, let's add a divider. We save that and see if that looks better, and that looks a lot better. Just gives it enough space that it's clear where one ends and one begins. The other thing I see is this station up here is looking entirely out of place. So let's go up to the top here where we have our app bar, we have our text, and let's give that a style, and let's give it theme.ofContext.text theme, and we'll give it the title. And there we go. Right, so the only thing we have really left to do there is when we click change, we need it to go to the settings page. So before we build that settings page and head down that road, let's revisit our BLoC. Let's start to add the properties that we would need on a settings page. And let's also get this, so we go back to blocks. We're going to go to SEPTA block. All right, so in our BLoC, we have this train property, which we have getters and setters for. And when we fire up when we instantiate the BLoC, we load at least a default station to get us started. And we make our HTTP call right here. And so I got questions on this, and they're really good questions. Thank you, Fabio, for making that query. Is this really a good place to put your HTTP call in your BLoC? And I think the answer is probably not. I think definitely not, for sure. What happened here is I kind of have like a time frame in my head for how long I wanted a video to be, and the last one was getting a little longer than I thought, and so I rushed it, and I got a little lazy here. So this is okay in a BLoC. I think if you've got a really small one, it doesn't belong there, but if it's not harming anything, it's not terrible to have it in there. But we're going to put more in this BLoC. We're going to make it more sophisticated. And so really this should be extracted into a service. So inside the lib folder, let's do that now. Let's create a new folder called services. And let's create a new service or a new file called SEPTA_service. And this just separates the concerns more clearly. A BLoC is for your state management, and you can certainly get away with putting a few helper functions in there to deal with your data, but you shouldn't go crazy. And certainly an HTTP call probably belongs in a service. So let's extract it. We'll get it out of here. So I will cut the load station data, and we will put it inside. We'll create a class called SEPTA service, lowercase c for class, and we'll put it right in there. Now we have a few calls that we put in, or imports we put in the BLoC. So these last two imports, you can see we no longer need them. We can cut those and bring those over to the service as well. So up above class. All right. We need to bring in the train model, so we can just use auto import to do that right here. And so this was a void because it was dumping right into the stream because it lived in the block, but we won't be able to do that anymore. So we need to change void to a list of trains, but actually, because it is async, it is a future list of type train. So make sure you get 2 closing brackets there. And so rather than change trains down here, we should just return trains, lowercase trains, and we can get rid of our comment because it's pretty obvious what's happening there. All right, that should take care of our service. So when we come back to the block, we've now broken the block, but we can fix that pretty easily. So we were referencing our function right here when the SEPTA block was built in the constructor. And we could add that back in there. We could call the service right from here. But I think this is a good time, since we're refactoring, we're going to have, eventually, we would like the settings of the user to be saved on the device, so that if they pull it up, their favorite station or the station or the stations that they use are saved on their device, so they're not having to search through the entire regional rail system every time to get their data. So at some point, we're going to need to load the settings from our user. So we might as well go ahead and create that function here in our block right now. So I'm down here, I'm going to create a void called load settings. And rather than load station data, when the block is constructed, that's when we're going to do load settings. Okay, so that will give us a space where when we fire up this block, the things that we want to happen in the future, which is probably to load the station that we want, to load the number of trains that we want to see, the directions, etc. Those can be loaded through the load settings, and we need to do a little bit of work to make all that happen, but we have a space to do it. So we need to add some more properties to our block here. So we have trains, but we really want to know what station we're looking for. So let's add a station property. And we'll make that a behavior subject. And it'll be a string. Now think about what else we might want in the settings. We would want to limit the number of trains that the user can see, or allow them to say, I want to see a ton of trains, or I just want to see the next 4. So that would be, we'll call that a count. So underscore count, private variable. That'll be a behavior subject, which is an integer. And then we want directions. And if we remember back to our train objects, what we have here is we have a direction, and it is either a, going back to Postman here and just looking at the API results, it's either an N for north or an S for south. And so if we think about what we might want there, so we want a string, but really what we want, is direction. Actually, I'm going to say directions is a behavior subject, but not necessarily a string, but a list of strings, because we might want north and south. And when we think about ways we might be able to represent that in the settings page, we want them to either be able to say yes, just south, or yes, just north, or both. And really a list, and whether the direction is included in the list would be what we would want to present. So let's do a list of strings. And so we can update our getters. We're going to have a stream of type integer. And what getter will be count. And that will go to count.stream. We'll have a stream of type string. Which will be get our station. That will go to station.stream. Semicolon. That should be underscore count. That's why we're getting an error there. And we want stream of type list of strings. Make sure you get 2 closing brackets there. Get that. It will be our directions. That will go to our directions stream. And we want setters as well. I don't know. Is it quicker to just copy and paste? Let's try. 1, 2, 3. So we want to change station. And so we want underscore station dot sync dot add, and that will be a string. And we want a function integer, which will be change count. And that will be underscore count. I think it would have been quicker to type. And we want a list of strings here. That will be our directions. And so that should be directions as well. Okay, this is barking at us because we aren't closing these streams, so let's do that. All right, so now we have our streams. Now, if we come in, we load our settings. We're going to run this function. Now we could say, let's change the count. We can load some initial settings, and we can replace this with shared preferences that we get off our device later on. But for a placeholder to get started, let's say we're going to change our count to 10. Going to change our directions to a list with both S and N. And we're going to change our station to suburban station. So now, at least we have a placeholder. When we load our settings, we are going ahead, we are loading up the streams with some default values for us to get started. And then when we think ahead to our settings page as well, we talked about this in the last one. When do we want to get new information from the API and when do we not? And we decided, at least I decided and vocalized into the microphone, that when we change the station, that's when we really need to go to the API. That data's got to be completely refreshed. It's no good to us anymore. But when we get that information, we were going to get the maximum amount of information that we could get. So we're going to get up to 20 results for that station and present no more than 20 for the count, so that when somebody chooses a lesser count, we don't really need to go back. Even though there's a parameter in the API that says you can get 5 results, you can get 11 results, 12, it really isn't costing us much in data to go ahead and get 20 results and then filter it down on the stream rather than through the API for count. Same thing with direction. We're going to get both directions, but if they don't want to see one, we'll just filter it out. We're not going to bother going back to the API for that. So changing the station, though, means we need to go back to the API. And to do that, we can do this with RxStart. We can set up a listener. So we will set up a listener. So we'll say our listeners, but we're only going to have one. And our listener is going to listen to station. All right. And it's going to have a station object. It's going to be async, and that's because we have to go to HTTP. And when the station changes, we're going to want to change our train objects, and we can do that with our SEPTA service that we just built. So let's bring that in. Let's bring it in up here. So let's create a final SEPTA service equals so this brings in an instance of the service we just created, and now we can say SEPTA service load station data, and the only parameter we've required in SEPTA in that service is station. We've hard-coded the number of results at 10. But remember, that's 10 for each direction, so it's really 20. And a semicolon there, and we're all set. So if we look at what this does, when this block is created, we load settings. We don't actually load trains, but we do change the station down here in our load settings to suburban station. And when that happens, this listener is going to fire. It's going to go out to the API, and it's going to get the trains. And so if we hit save here and we refresh our state, I risk my reputation on the fact that the station will still be there. And there they are. Phew. All right, so we get this data up here. All right, so before we wrap up today, I think it's probably important to set up, or at least scaffold our settings page so that when we hit change here, it takes us to that page. We can fill in our station here because we now have a stream to grab from. And then when we come back in the next episode, we can build the settings page. But if I don't do those two things now, odds are I won't remember to do them later. So let's do them now. So in our services, let's build a new file. We're going to call it settings. No, not services. Screens. Settings.dart. And that is going to be a class of settings. And it's going to extend a stateless widget. And we will let code complete do our build method, and I'm fine with null for now. Let's return null. All I wanted to be able to do was come back here to departures and get rid of this to-do setting. So on click, we want to go to the settings page, or on pressed. So that's navigator of context dot push, and we're going to push a material page route, which will have a builder with a context that goes to settings page. All right, and we need to import the settings page. Do that there. And so at the top of this, we have station as our placeholder. Let's get rid of that. So let's wrap the text widget with a stream builder, because we can stream that data right to the text widget. And we are looking for the station object, which is a string. And the stream that we're going to grab is BLoC station. And so if we don't get data, if snapshot data has data, here we go, does not have data, let's just return an empty, and we'll just return an empty container is fine. All right, hit the code format, hit save, and let's go ahead and refresh. Oh, sorry. Let's actually get our snapshot here. So replace station with snapshot.data. Then we now see suburban station up there. I'm just going to refresh that data just for fun. Watch it go out there. We get a nice little spinner effect that lets us know it's going out to the data. I appear to have an upload going, so this is really kind of slow right now, but there it is right there. And so we are on our way. So when we come back the next time, we're going to build the settings page, and that user will be able to select a station from a dropdown. They'll be able to say, you know what, I don't want to see this many results. I only need to see 4, and I'm going north. I don't care about south. So they'll be able to filter all that out. So hope you come back for the next video. If you enjoyed this, please like and subscribe as always, and thanks for watching.